How have you been? Have you been staying busy? Have you been like super productive?
Yes,
Okay.
very much. Doing Primal, and then two movies in development with Sony. So it's been very busy.
So you're not a part of the fourth Hotel Transylvania?
I'm like an executive producer type.
Okay.
So.
Good. I'm glad that you're still shepherding the franchise. I love that.
Yes.
Well, before we get into Primal, I wanted to take it back to your early days. And I've never talked to you about your work on Batman the Animated Series and sort of what you took from that experience.
Wow. That's going back to 1992, and I was just graduated CalArts, and actually Sergio Pablos, right, the guy from Claws and everything, and Disney. He's from Spain, and he invited a couple of producers from a Spanish studio in Madrid to come to the CalArts producer show, which is the kind of like, the NFL draft for CalArts animation. And they saw my film, they liked it. They said, "You want to work in Spain as an animator?" And, I was 22 years old, and I was like, yeah, that sounds good. And so I was working on I think it's the first season of Batman, and I could literally barely draw back then, and then to jump into drawing the Bruce Timm designs, which are incredible, and that whole thing realistic. And I was just doing cartoony stuff. I mean, my student film was Dexter's Lab, basically, right? And so to get into that kind of complexity in drawing was really hard, and it was fun, and I managed it, but certainly it was beyond my drawing ability. The animation I could handle, but drawings were rough, and they had these amazing layouts and stuff, and so it was fun, but at the same time, I think I was probably too young to understand everything, and how and you're working at technically an overseas studio, right? So you're trying to do a lot of work for not a lot of money, and fast, very, very fast.
And you guys were working on black paper too, right? I've always heard that story.
On black paper?
Yeah, or maybe it was just the backgrounds that were black paper.
Oh yeah, the backgrounds they were painting, I think, a lot on black. No, we were working on normal paper, very traditional, and then the whole, I remember the whole studio was just always full of smoke because everybody smoked back then. And by the time I got in, by 8 a.m, some of the guys, their ashtrays were already like a mountain of cigarette butts. So the whole studio just reeked of cigarettes.
Did you take away anything from like the action choreography or anything from that original?
No, not so much. Because sometimes, you kind of would get a sequence,
mm-hmm.
but the storyboards were detailed, but not enough that it would break down all the fight poses. It had the general idea of it.
Okay.
And one of the first things I had to animate was in this karate dojo, these people fighting, right? And then the people fight out of the way and reveal, Bruce Wayne having a conversation. And the pose and the board was like one pose. So you have to do a whole, 6 seconds of everybody fighting. So you have to figure out your own choreography pretty much.
Another thing I was reading about last night, and somebody else on the staff had a question about, was this infamous R-rated episode of Dexter's Lab that you say is only shown at festivals now or something. Can you talk about where that came from and sort of what the intention was?
Yeah, so it was called Rude Removal, and basically the idea was for it was what did Dee Dee do? I forget what she did specifically, but basically Dexter, because she was so rude, he was gonna separate the rude Dee Dee from the nice Dee Dee. And basically, of course, Dee Dee messed it all up, and then there became the rude versions of Dexter and Dee Dee. And they basically swore, and they did all these rotten things, right? So they were like the evil doppelgangers.
Right.
And when we recorded it with the actual words, all the F-bombs and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And but then in the episode that we aired, it was all bleeped.
Okay.
So, and it was like 80% bleeps in the episode for when they talked. Right, so it's like, "Bop, beep, 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 you. And yeah, it was funny and it was all safe, but for whatever reason, the network kind of panicked. And this is probably 97 or something like that, right? So they pulled it off the air, but then everybody heard about it. And so I think Adult Swim aired it actually maybe 5 years ago or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I showed it at a few like, things that I was doing here and there. But yeah, and then we do have somewhere the original track with the real swearing, but I've never put it to picture yet. So,
one thing I love to talk to you about, and I always bring it up whenever I see you, is the Clone Wars stuff that you did for Lucas. And one time you told me, that all the stuff that you had contributed to the Star Wars lore was sort of put into canon, and then once they did the CG version, that stuff was sort of taken out. What are your sort of feelings about that experience now, and has anyone told you why it's no longer available at all? It seems very weird to me that they've sort of deleted it from the history books.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it's certainly, there's nothing official of why they did it. I mean, we all have our own theories, and I think basically he just, it's like a restart. Here's going to be this, here's going to be the CG ones, and they're going to be the canon or the lore, and everything we did is going to be kind of just like, oh, that never happened, basically, And yeah, I mean, we were super, super proud of what we did, and the reaction was great to it, and there's still people talk about it, which is really nice, with all the new Star Wars coming up. And yeah, I mean, people don't realize how fast we do this stuff and how like it's just first instinct, and you get kind of sometimes judged almost like on a feature level. But when you do TV, it's instant. Like we had 2 weeks to develop it. And then I went to Lucas and pitched what we were going to do, and that was it. And then we started writing and going. It was incredibly fast. And so for the amount of time that we had and everything, I think it, still some of my best work and our best work, and it's always something I'm proud of. And yeah, and whatever happened, and what are you going to do? That's Hollywood, as they say.
Yeah, I mean. We've also talked about how much Favreau drew inspiration from Samurai Jack for the first Iron Man. And I was wondering if he reached out again, because there's some very kind of Clone Wars-y things in The Mandalorian, it feels like. Particularly the second episode, which is almost silent. It's got this great action and sort of broad comedy. But did he ever reach out to you about borrowing from Clone Wars for Mandalorian?
No. Okay. No, I mean, we worked together on Iron Man 2.
Yeah.
Of course, right? And then, but then no, after that, we kind of lost touch, and he has not.
Well, I know that you were talking about doing Thor at one point. Do you have any desires to go back to the MCU?
I mean, yeah, that was I think it was just a blip moment where I met with Kevin Feige, and it was the beginnings of Thor, and he started asking me about it, and for a second I thought, yeah, if you want me to direct the live action Thor, I am in. But I don't think that was his intention. It was just, it might have been like a small little blip because I was there. But no, I mean, I think if somebody, obviously I grew up with Marvel Comics and they have a very warm place in my heart. And yeah, if somebody wanted me to do a take on something, sure, I'd be up for it.
Somebody asked about this, and I thought it was very, very interesting. Symbiotic Titan, which is now streaming again, which is so great. It seems to have had an influence on Pacific Rim and sort of Three Below, the DreamWorks animated show. Do you keep in touch with Guillermo, or you guys have a relationship?
We met a couple of times, and okay. He expressed that he's a fan and stuff. And but besides that, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you see these things, are you sort of like, oh, that little show sort of made a difference?
I've never seen Three Below, but I mean, when I read the synopsis, I go, well, that's kind of similar. And then, for Pacific Rim, there's like a few things that are very similar, but at the same time, it's, there's been giant robot stuff for years that we all are inspired by. So who knows if there's just a crossover, mm-hmm. or if it truly is, more specific the inspiration to Titan.
Right.
But yeah, but I mean, Titan again was something. It was probably the hardest production we did because of all the kind of studio politics that we were in the middle of at the time, and the Cartoon Network growing and not growing, and finding who their voice was. And so I think we kind of got caught in the middle of all that. But yeah.
It seems like that was something that you had planned to do for many years, like Samurai Jack. I mean, if they offered you a chance to return, would you go back to that world?
To Titan? Yeah, I mean, I think with the streaming, there was always almost a little resurgence, kind of, right? And so I think it needs to, because I think Samurai, Jack suffered almost the same type of fate, where it's a mashup of different influences, right? It's not just like a straight action show. It's got a lot of comedy. It's got this irreverence. It's got a lot of things. And so that sometimes turns off the pure audience. I just want hardcore samurai action. What's with this, comedy thing? And so it always tries to find its audience. And Samurai took a long time, really not until the adult ones came out that it really gained the momentum that it had. When we first aired, it was successful, but certainly not on a SpongeBob level or anything like that.
Right.
And I think the same thing with Titan. It's, John Hughes and giant robots,
right.
16 candles and Ultraman or whatever. And so it's specific, but that's what I like. I mean, that you can only do what you like, and if you're sincere, maybe other people will like it.
Right.
I could never do a show like, hey, Gendy, pirates are hot right now. Can you do a pirate show?
Yeah.
It's got to come from your heart.
Well, I wanted to just check in on, you said you're still working on Fixed and Black Knight, correct?
Yes.
How's that going?
It's going really good. It's hard. Both hard in a very different ways. Where Fixed, you're trying to do a comedy, that's raunchy, but at the same time, it's got, still characters, and I want it to be like a Superbad.
Okay.
Tone, where there's raunchiness and stuff, but the characters are real and you believe it, right? So there's a little bit of that struggle finding its place, and it's low budget, and does the studio want to do it or not? So you're finding your footing, because it's a business. Mm-hmm. Right, so it's got to make sense financially, and with the whole, pandemic thing, it certainly doesn't make it easier. And then Black Knight is a similar thing in a different way, where you're doing a PG-13 straight action epic. There's no comedy relief, talking animals or anything. It's for real, and it's got to be really good and different and unique and all that stuff. So just finding its voice and its tone.
Are those both CG or 2D, or where are we at with that?
I don't think I can say.
Okay. We will be
trying to figure out. It'll be both unique in their own way.
Okay.
So
and there was a recent report that Popeye was back. Is that something you are working on? I mean, King Features, it said, is setting this new feature up, who are working on the Cuphead show. Is that something that's still happening?
Yeah, well, basically, it's they have the rights again. King Features does, and they contacted me, and I said, look, if somebody wants to do it, I'll do it if I could fit it into the schedule and stuff. And I know there was some kind of weird leak that came out that made it sound like we're making it,
mm-hmm.
But we're not yet. But there's people that we're talking to see if somebody wants to make it.
Okay.
You still need money, as money makes the world go around. So somebody's got to believe in Popeye and believe in the version, and it's that minute 15 test is out there, and that's exactly what I want to do. So it's pretty simple. If you want 90 minutes of this, then I'm in. And so yes, I think King Features has been kind of shopping it around and seeing if there's anybody that wants to do it.
So if they get the money, though, you'll direct?
Yes.
Okay.
If the timing works out with everything.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about Primal. First of all, where did this come from? Was this an idea that you had wanted to sort of investigate for a long time, this kind of primordial world?
Yeah, and it's funny because it began, I don't know, over 10 years ago probably, and I was just doodling this little kid, almost like a Tezuka-style kid, because I was really a big fan of Astro Boy.
Okay.
Right, if you want to go way back. And actually, after I wrote the Astro Boy script, geez, I don't know how long ago that was, I reread all the comics, and I kind of re-fell in love with that art style, the way he draws. And so a few years after that, I started doodling. I needed a new show to do, and I was doodling this kid riding a dinosaur. And in that kind of Astro Boyish style. And I liked it, but it kind of didn't go anywhere. I really believe in the stories coming together organically, instead of kind of forcing them in. So the story didn't develop properly, and I fell out of love with it for a bit. Then years later, when we were doing Samurai Jack, the adult one for Adult Swim, it kind of came back, and then I started to think about some visuals, and I aged it up, right? And so I started drawing it still in the Tezuka style, but older feeling. And I made it much more simple. It's basically about survival, And after the Samurai Jack series came out, and it was so successful, and people kept saying, "Oh, I love the sequences where there was no dialogue," right? And then it kind of hit me like, wow, could I do an actual half-hour show made up of just those sequences, right? And then, well, what kind of story can facilitate that so it feels natural, it doesn't feel forced, right? And all of a sudden I remembered, oh yeah, I had that little caveman boy and dinosaur idea. And well, let me see if I could do it. And so I started just to do one storyboard pilot, basically, to see if I could do an episode, right? And then I did it, and it flowed really well. And that was basically the first episode, Spear and Fang. And we were finishing, and Mike Lazo, who was running Adult Swim at the time, he's like, "So what's next after Jack?" And I said, "Well, I kind of got this thing, no dialogue, survival at its primal, but really a story that I've never done before about a beast and a man relationship versus man and woman or man and man or whatever." And I pitched in the storyboard because I go, there's no way you can understand this until you see this storyboard. And I pitched him the board, and he loved it. And then he's like, "Yeah, let's do a series of it." And then we started going. Wow.
I was going to say, I was wondering if the sort of lack of dialogue was a roadblock at all, but it sounds like it was a selling point.
Yeah, it totally was. It created a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like, I've always wanted to do things that you create a feel, a tone that's unique to what I do. And when you watch it, the highest compliment you can get as a director goes, "Oh, that feels like a Hitchcock film," or "That's Hitchcock for sure," or Spielberg or whatever. And you want to have a signature. And so it felt very much into what I was doing. And also, like I reread, or I read, I can't remember the timeline, but it was definitely before we started Primal. I read the Conan books, the short stories, right? And as much of a Conan fan I was, I never got around to reading the actual books. And when I read them, it was like, wow, these are so amazing. They're so much fun. They're very pulpy. And you just kind of drop in, and, Conan is walking with a girl in the desert, and they come upon this village, and the village is deserted, and there's a beast who fed upon this village. And they've got to deal with it. And I love the immediacy of it, and I love the pulp of it. And so I structured, and I thought it was perfect for animation, for Primal. And so I structured the stories that way, where you just kind of drop in, and there's character growth and all this stuff, but you're just in the vignette of this world.
Well, can you talk a little bit about your influences? Because some of the installments are really wild. Particularly, there's sort of this psychedelic kind of, I don't know, what are those beasts that have that community and all that? So can you talk about where these sort of ideas came from and what you were inspired by? Was it old sort of pulpy paperbacks like that?
Yeah, I mean, the Conan is for the story structures and the feel. The Conan and some of the other stuff he wrote too, like all the Robert E. Howard feel, is definitely one of the big inspirations. The drawings, we wanted to feel like we're all kids of the 70s. Most of the people that worked on the show, Myself, Scott, Derek Bachman, who did a little writing, Brian Andrews, and did some boards. We're all, from the 70s. And so we have that love of 70s grit and rawness, and so we wanted it to feel like that. Like, we never had good rated R animation when we were kids, right? It was, the heavy metal, the movie that came out. It was Wizards, some, the Ralph Bakshi stuff. But there was something about that, even though they were weird and not great, there was a rawness to it that we really reacted to. And so we wanted it to have that grit. And to break away from what we've done before, the really clean lines of Samurai Jack and Clone Wars and everything. And so we did this kind of more Mobius-inspired line work drawings. And then Scott Wills, who does all the backgrounds painting, he created this more like watercolor. And, Frazetta is obviously a huge influence also. And so we were we always want to try to do a Frazetta, but nobody can paint like that really. And so we did our own stylized caricatured version of Frazetta with these more watercolor and everything. And so that's kind of how it started to come together. And I think those are the big influences. So it's Frazetta, 70s stuff in general, and then Robert E. Howard.
What was the hardest aspect of the production? Was it sort of striking that tonal balance? Was it choreographing the action? What was it?
Yeah, I think it's the hardest was probably, doing the storyboards is rough because the drawings are so much more. And I think just doing a half-hour storyboard with no dialogue, it is intense because all the storytelling, you just got to do visually. There's no shortcut. Usually you rely on to get through the schedule. Oh, great, dialogue sequence. Headshot, 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 overhead, and then you're moving on, right? So it's a lot simpler with some acting. But this was, everything is cinematic and you're telling everything. And then, so that was probably the hardest thing to discover. And as we got rolling, we realized, wow, we could do such more complex stories. And especially once you get to the second half, episodes 6 through 10, there's some stories that are so emotionally complex. It's incredible.
Well, I was going to ask you, what is the status of the latter half of the season? Is that still coming this year, or have things been slowed down?
Yeah, I think they kind of announced it's going to be in the fall of this year.
Okay, great.
Yeah, there's no specific date, but it's coming for sure.
And you left us on such a cliffhanger there.
Right.
So is it safe to say that the dinosaur will return?
Yeah, well, for April Fools, right, they ran one of the episodes. I don't know if you saw that or not.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, on April Fool's Day, they didn't announce it, and they basically aired another episode of Primal, a new Rick and Morty, whatever new shows they had that weren't officially premiering for a while. They just ran them for one day on April Fool's Day. And so we showed this episode, Plague of Madness, and yeah, Fang's in it, so it's kind of letting it out.
Were you surprised at how successful the show was and how well it was received?
Yeah, because it's so specific. I had no clue. I knew it would have like a small, perhaps cultish audience that likes that kind of stuff. But yeah, when people started to react to the emotions of the show, that's when you've got something. There's only so much success that you can get with bells and whistles, right? Where it's all shiny and beautiful and crazy, but you got to have a strong core.
Mm-hmm.
And because we focused on their relationship, and and I have this big Saint Bernard dog that is very human and strange, and she's crazy, and she has this range of emotion that's amazing. That was kind of the big inspiration. And I go, oh, if I can hook into that relationship, even though Fang's not a dog, obviously, but still, animals, and the more nature shows you watch, you're like, wow, there's so much more complexity to the life of animals that that I have probably ever imagined. And
right.
So hooking into that, and if people hook into it, that's what I think it'll elevate the show beyond just kind of, cool action and atmosphere and stuff.
It seems to have taken Adult Swim by surprise as well, by considering the complete lack of merchandise available. And if I do not have that dinosaur on my desk in the next, 18 months, I'm going to die. But what have you kind of corrected that at all? Is there going to be stuff coming out with the second half?
I don't know. It's such a hard thing to answer because, when we're working on Dexter or stuff, that's a, kids show, 6 to 11. If you make toys where they belong in the toy aisle, right? When you're doing an adult show and the audience is supposed to be adult, how many of them buys toys?
Right.
You know what I mean? And so how does that look like? Where does it fit in? I know there's a lot of us that still do, but it's more a collector thing. And how do you get to that mass that makes sense to put something at Toys R Us?
Right.
And so I think it's still, you still need a lot of episodes to create a toy line. And, I don't know how many episodes Rick and Morty have, but it had to get to that level before they start doing a lot of merchandise. We're just 5 coming up into 10.
Right.
So I think it's early. I know you want instant gratification, and I want it too, but there's a level of patience. Unless you start out like a toy show.
Right.
And that's what I was hoping for Symbionic Titan. Is like we launch, we've got a toy line, you're all in.
Right.
And it just kind of didn't happen that way.
There weren't toys for that either? Okay. I saw Primal in the theater, actually, when they
that's great.
put them all together. Yeah, I mean, was that an important sort of part of the rollout of the show to you?
Yeah, and it's something the network really supported. They believed in it, and they thought it was very unique and artistic, and they wanted this, awards run for it. And it made sense to me because I envisioned it always end as an anthology, like a Heavy Metal,
right,
like a Fantasia, like all those things. And so it started to come together that way. And to watch it with an audience is awesome because there's so much silence, and you're sitting there, and usually, at Hotel Transylvania or the other things, as soon as you get that first laugh with an audience, you're like, oh, okay, everything's okay now. And with Primal, people were so sucked in, and it was so quiet. I go, they're either sleeping or they're really into it. And so it made it for a very interesting experience.
With these last 5, is this it, or is this a world that you are looking to return to at some point?
I think I would definitely want to return to it, and I know there's been conversations and stuff. So I think it's I'm pretty confident we'll probably do more.
Okay, how important is it to you while making features just to keep continuing sort of working on these episodic projects? Is it like a palate cleanser, or is it just working out a different muscle, or what?
It's a little bit of both, for sure. Doing it started kind of with Jack to do Hotel Transylvania, then a 2D adult series, and then back to another Transylvania, and then another 2D adult series. It felt really good because CG is, in a way, with animation especially, I'm a little bit more hands off. And with 2D, I still love to draw. I love the feeling of the drawings. I love the 2D animation. And so, and with features, like, look, you've got a big committee you've got to please, right? And
right,
you're working for the gigantic mass audience for mainstream appeal to make the most money. And that's the reality. So you fight for a lot, but there's also a level of stuff of experimentation. And Hotel is what Hotel is. It's fun. It's silly. It's, fun animation. There's some heart to it. And then, it's very simple. And with Black Knight, with Fixed, there's more levels to it, right? So you can start pushing it more. And with Primal, it was all experimentation, right? And so it has to make sense for the medium that you're working for.
Well, what is Sony's sort of position on this? Do they go, well, we would never make this, so go have fun? Or are you just like, I'm going to go do this and I'll be away 2 days out of the week and they're fine with it? Or how does that work?
It's all juggled. Look, I wrote the first pass of the Black Knight script. So I find time to do everything. Cause look, we've got one go around in this life. And so I never want to look back and go, oh, if I worked a little harder, maybe I could have made this happen. Everything I do is 110%. I never want to leave something that I can regret later.
Right.
Obviously if I couldn't draw this well or storyboard this well at this time, it is what it is. So I never look back in quality wise, but there's no regrets in the career as far as how much effort I put in. Right. So if there's opportunities, if somebody's presenting me like, hey, Gendy, we want to make one of your action things in a movie, yeah, I'll do whatever it takes to get that going. In the meantime, we're doing what's a green light, and then we're doing what's development, and those things usually balance themselves off.
Right.
In Hollywood, in the industry, you basically have 5 to 7 projects. You're always trying to hustle and to sell, and you're lucky if one of those goes.
Right.
And we always joke around, like sometimes it looks like 5 projects are going to go. And I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to do it? This is going to be horrible. And then for whatever reason, they all fall through. And then you're lucky if one goes.
Right.
And actually, like when we were doing the adult Samurai Jack, that was the craziest we've ever been, because we were doing Jack. We were writing Hotel 3. I was finishing up the Cage comic. And then I had a Netflix thing we were developing. So I had 4 things in progress, and that never has happened before.
Right.
So eventually things fell out, and then it just happened the way it did.
Well, one time you told me that, part of the reason that you backed away from the Lucasfilm deal was that you kind of saw yourself only directing Star Wars things for the next 10 years. And then it ended up that you kind of were directing Hotel Transylvania things for the next 10 years. I mean, looking back on that period, sort of what do you take away from that?
Well, I mean, specifically, that was initially a situation where I was going in the understanding that I will make my own feature for Lucas, Lucas Animation or Lucasfilm, and then I will supervise the progression of the Star Wars, Clone Wars stuff, right? And then when George said, well, I don't want to do features, animated features, I only want to do this TV stuff, I said, well, I want to do features. Like I've done, by that point, maybe 15 years of TV, and I wanted to progress, and I still love television, and I wanted to do more, but I also wanted an opportunity to do features. And so that's how it closed. And because I knew I had that instinct of, oh, right, I think George just wants a lot more of this. And then when you look at it, that's exactly what he did, and so going into Hotel, it's not a commitment like that. It's like you do one movie, and if it's successful, maybe there's another. And I had a chance to do, we almost made Popeye, we almost made Can You Imagine? So there was a lot of hustling. It doesn't feel like I just signed in through 4 movies, right? It wasn't my life. And then, I've done Samurai Jack, we've done, Primal, we've done so much around all that it feels a lot fuller than I think if I committed to just Lucas.
Right. I mean, you brought up Netflix, and does that world hold appeal to you? I know that, between Sergio and Henry Selick's got a movie over there, and Guillermo's doing an animated movie.
Right.
They seem to really trust their animators and sort of let them go wild. But you have not made a movie for Netflix yet. So
it's been a really funny, weird situation with them where I've gone through, I think, 3 projects.
Really?
And I can't get one going. I'm the only one that they hate so much that they don't want to work with me. Everybody else gets everything. And for some reason, without getting into all the crazy weeds of the details, can't get one greenlit. And
can you talk about what those were?
No, I can't.
Okay. The other question.
But just to say, and also for television, I have my Adult Swim relationship, my Cartoon Network relationship, and it's such a strong and good one, and there's so much trust and faith. It's hard to do TV for somebody else because I have almost a perfect situation.
Right. The movie you were developing with Lucasfilm before he said, it's all Star Wars all the time. Do you own the rights to that, or is that going to be in some? Is that in a Lucasfilm vault somewhere, and we'll never
No,
see?
it's still mine.
Okay, okay. So you could return to that at some point.
Yeah, it's hard. It was a Viking themed thing before How to Train Your Dragon.
Okay.
Right. So it's kind of hard to. I think it's hard to sell a Viking animated movie right now because How to Train Your Dragon is still kind of fresh, and so, and I think of some of the ideas got transferred into Primal, a few little ones, and so probably if I was to do something, it would be something. Black Knight is wholly original, and so I think I've kind of moved on from that.
Okay. Is there anything that you've watched or during this quarantine, or any sort of animation that you think is not getting enough attention or is underrated that you think people should check out?
I watched a lot of I love The Kingdom, which is the zombie Korean show, which is really cool. What else? I watched the Extraction.
Okay. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, it was such a cool action movie. You wanted a little more from it, but it's certainly wow, these guys do action so well.
Yeah.
Right. So that was really fun to watch, and you don't get a lot of, really well choreographed, more unique perspective on action than they did. What else? Animation's tough. I am such an asshole with animation. I have such a small window of acceptance of what I like and what I want animation to be that I judge everything so harshly on such a high level. So nothing makes it. I will say, I watched a couple episodes of Carol and Tuesday.
Okay.
Right. It's from the same people who did Cowboy Bebop, which is one of my favorite things. And that was really interesting and cool and unique. I'm trying to think what else I watched.
What fits in your window of acceptance?
Well, I want it to be drawn very well, right? A lot of strong draftsmanship, a unique point of view, animation, things are animated, not just talking.
Okay.
And just kind of directed, they have a vision, they have somebody in charge that is saying something.
Right. Are there any filmmakers in the mainstream that you admire and are always excited to see what they're doing?
Live action wise, certainly. Yeah. Animation wise, I think, a lot of, the people who did Cowboy Bebop, I'll keep track of what Madhouse, Production IG, the guy who did Mind Game, I always forget how to say his name properly. There's a lot of directors who are very visionary.
Okay.
And they do things sensibility wise, it always something that's attractive to me. And so I kind of follow what they do. Yeah. In the States, it's hard. It's such a, I feel like I'm old. When I watch some of the shows, I go, wow, I don't understand it. I understand it, but it's such a different way of storytelling than the way we tell our stories. And it's great because there's room for everything. But yeah.
With the Hotel Transylvania movies, were you trying to pull kind of Western mainstream animation in a little different direction, a little odder, especially in the third one? I feel like that you really push things. And was that always sort of the intent?
Yeah. It's cartoons. It's animated. It's Warner Brothers. It's 50s Disney. It's, Goofy. It's all the cartoony animation, Tex Avery. It's all physical, exaggerated, squashy, stretchy. It's all that stuff that you don't see a lot in CG. The principles are there, but much more Disney principles than Warner Brothers or Tex Avery or Tom and Jerry principles or Popeye. And so I wanted more of this. So my whole take was, well, I'm going to do a cartoon feature and laugh at movement and posing, which is really hard to do, but that would be the goal. And so the third one, because I got to write it with Michael McCullers, we were able to structure it to facilitate even more animation. Where the first two, it had it in there, but there was like twice as much dialogue.
Right.
But now all of a sudden we've got swimming underwater sequences, like 3 or 4 dance sequences, a big fight sequence with dance, which is one of my favorite things. And watching that on the big screen, it's super fun.
Was that the take that got those movies made? Because infamously, they've been developing a Hotel with Monsters idea for God knows how long.
Yeah.
Was that the take that got it through?
Well, not purposely. Without going too deep into the first one, but basically, yeah, like I came into the project where they showed me, it's been in progress for 8 years. I was the 6th director on, right? And so they go, and at the same time, there's always a start and stop. Right. So they get to a certain point and they go, you know what, this isn't working, we got to start over, right? For 8 years.
Right.
So I walk in, they have all the models already built. They have the castle fully built. And sometimes for 3 different movies. So there's like some random room that's completely tricked out that nobody knows what to do with. And, Mavis is from a different movie that they were developing, like more of a romantic comedy, more like really heartfelt Pixar-ish feel. Frank and Dracula were developed from a whole different movie. And so I stepped in and I got it. I'm like, well, yeah. And Adam Sandler just signed on too to do the voice. So I thought, well, you've got Adam Sandler, you've got this amalgam of weird characters, you've got a castle. Yeah, we'll make it Mad Monster Party, basically. I'll bring a silliness to it, or Mad Magazine. I'll bring a silliness and fun to it. And what's my view in the CG world? Well, I'll do it cartoony and exaggerated. Going back to more of the Dexter roots and all that stuff, but pushed even further with stuff that I love, and see if we can do it and really push CG animation to a cartoony world. So then everybody started to fight for what this movie is. I've got the singular vision of what I want to do with it, but they've been so crazy with all these different versions, they don't even know what's what. And then we start doing it, and then we had our first sequence where it was animated that way, right? And I kept trying to push Adam to do a broader performance, and he wasn't sure about it, how that's going to translate. Comedians are always concerned about being hacky, right? So we had to find where he was happy and I was delivering his humor properly, right? And all of a sudden they saw the sequence, and the executives were like, wow, it's so broad, right? They were shocked because they've never seen, you're used to see, if you only see Disney, then all of a sudden you have this, and all of a sudden you have this, and it's like having a bite of steak if you're a vegetarian, right? It's shocking. Like, what is this? Right. And so they were, it was like all the crazy poses and stuff. And so I'll never forget the review, because they were in shock. People were laughing, but they were shocked. And they go, wow, this is so broad. Is it too much? And I said, no, it completely supports everything that we've built. Supports the story, supports the tone, and supports Adam. And this is what it is. And they were like, okay. And then I remember later they go, Genndy, we would have never let you do this if it was a normal movie. And I'm like, okay. And then the movie explodes for Sony success. It's their most successful one. And then all of a sudden it becomes, well, we're going to do cartoony now. We're cartoony with heart. That's what they coined. And so, yeah, so it would have gotten made a whole different way. And it was this gigantic battle. So it wasn't like everybody goes, yes, that's a great idea, let's do it super cartoony. No, it was the exact opposite.
Well, keep fighting for all of your crazy ideas. The animation world and the world in general is better for it. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for chatting with me. I always love to talk to you, and hopefully we'll get to chat when the second half of Primal drops later this year.
Yeah, it's going to be something. So, all right. Thank you.